In English language, we find there are different types of poetry. It is because of the assimilation of the various forms which are there in the other languages, which English has assimilated in it. That resulted into a variety forms of poetry in English language. The first one that we first know need to know is that there is a kind of a difference between the two forms of poetry. That is, one is free form and the other is the traditional form. The traditional form that include the well defined structure, that means there is a kind of a form of a structure which is there in the rhyme, rhythm, meter, and the syllable count. For example, as in the poems like sonnets, haiku, villanelle, limerick. Let me give you an example of sonnet. Sonnet is considered to be a 14-line stanza and it has a strict rhyme meter. And however, there are different experimentation also there in this form. In this lecture, we are only going to concentrate on the traditional forms of poetry. Narrative poetry. This type of poetry tells a story, often using poetic techniques to convey the narrative. The story is there, but the presentation of the story is not in the form of prose, but it is there in the form of poetry. There is a kind of a rhyme, there is a meter, and there will be other figures of speeches. For example, as in the work of epic like Iliad and Odyssey, even also in the ballad form. For example, Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Lyrical poetry. Lyric is the word, the meaning of the lyric is lyre, that is it derived from the word lyre, and which means music. So lyrics are usually short poem that are having intense emotional quality, that expressing feelings and thoughts of the poet. They often explore the themes of love, nature, beauty, and personal experiences. Sonnet is the most popular form which we come to, which we know very well, and it is the old form of poetry, and it was made popular by famous poet none other than William Shakespeare. But the sonnet actually originated in 13th century Italy. From the sonnet origin, as we know that it is from 13th century Italy, and where it was perfected by the poet Petrarch. The word sonnet is derived from the Italian word sonetto, which means little song. Traditionally, sonnets are made up of 14 lines, usually deals with love. However, in the modern time, we are having sonnets on different themes also. That is, experimental sonnets are also there. As a rule, a Petrarchan sonnet follow an scheme of that is two quatrain and a tercet is there. Two tercet, two quatrain, two tercet. A B A, A B A, A B A. CDE CDE rhyme scheme, whereas the Shakespearean sonnet are typically AB CD 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 EF G G. That is, it consists of three quatrain and it conclude with a couplet. However, there is another form which is being experimented by Milton, that is the Curtal sonnet, that is of that he has used in his poem on his blindness, and also there is another form of sonnet which is being experimented by Spenser, Edmund Spenser, which is known as Spenserian sonnet. Villanelle is another very old form of poetry that came from France and has lots of rules, and it is made up of 19 lines, 5 stanzas of 3 lines tercet each, and a final stanza of 4 lines, that is quatrain. As you can see from the rhyme scheme, ABA 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 ABAA, this type of poem only has two rhyming sounds. Plus there is a lot of repetition throughout the villanelle. Line 1 will be repeated in line 6, 12, and 18, and line 3 will be repeated in line 9, 15, and 19. So although this takes out the extra work of having to write 19 individual lines, the real challenge is to make meaning out of those repeated lines. And the Villanelle was experimented by Dylan Thomas in his Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. It's a very complex form of poetry, but it is practiced by some of the writers and liked by the readers. Limericks are funny and sometimes rude. Poems which were made popular by Edward Lear in 19th century. They have a set rhyme scheme AABBA, with lines 1, 2, and 5 all being longer in length than lines 3 and 4. The last line is often the punchline. Ode. Ode is one of the oldest forms of poetry and believed to have come from ancient Greece. The word ode is derived from the Greek word adian, which means to sing or chant. These poems were originally performed with a musical instrument. An ode is typically written to praise a person, event, or thing, and they are usually quite short in length. For example, it was John Keats who popularized this ode form, and he has written some of the wonderful odes like Ode to Nightingale, Ode to Psyche, Ode to Melancholy, Ode to Autumn, so on and so forth. Allergy. An allergy doesn't have rule like some of the other forms of poetry, but it does have a set subject, that it is a sad poem, that is death. They are usually written about a loved one who has passed away, but can also be written about a group of people, or even about a city monument, or even about for example, the thing which is not working. For example, if even if your mobile is not working, the allergy form nowadays is being written on these topics also. The popular allergy is written by Thomas Gray, that is Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. Ballad. The ballad is another old and traditional form of poetry that typically tells a dramatic or emotional story. They came from Europe in the late Middle Ages and were initially passed down from one generation to another, and often with music. Ballads do not have a set rule. They are typically four line, that is quatrain, and a rhyme scheme A B A B or A B C B. However, this form is looser than others, so can be modified to suit a writer's need. For example, the popular ballad is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Acrostic, like haikus, you are likely to encounter acrostic poem at school, but that doesn't mean they are boring. In fact, far from it, this type of poetry spells out a name, word, phrase, or message with the first letter of each line of the poem. It can rhyme or not, and typically the word spelled out lays down the theme of the poem. Ghazal. Ghazals are a type of Arabic poetry that dates to the 7th century. Ghazals are short poems composed of five or more couplets, usually no more than 15. A couplet is a pair of lines that typically have the same meter and rhyme. However, ghazals translated into English often can't retain their rhyme schemes or meters. Sometimes this rhyme is replaced by a repeated word or phrase known as the radif or refrain. This word or phrase is repeated at the end of both lines in the first couplet and again in the second line of the succeeding couplets. Ghazal, for example, are written by Mirza Ghalib, are very popular. Then even there are ghazals which are written by Arun Rich and even Aga Shahid Ali, and many writers practice this particular form of poetry. An epitaph is much like an elegy, only shorter. Epitaph commonly appear on gravestone, but they can also be humorous. There are no specific rule to for epitaph or their rhyme schemes. For example, there is an epitaph which is written by Thomas Gray in his poem Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. The famous epitaph that is by Shakespeare on his gravestone is written, Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares the stones, and cursed be he that moves my bone. That's a Shakespearean epitaph. Epigram. Epigrams are short, witty, and often satirical poems that usually take the form of a couplet or quatrain, 2 4 lines in length. An example of this wit is provided by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Sir, I admit your general rule that every poet is a fool, but you yourself may serve to show it that every fool is not a poet. Thank you.